Having an inaugural conference in South Africa to endorse the current President Yoweri Museveni as the sole candidate for the ruling party for the 2021 elections. Well, joining us now is the patron of the National Resistance Movement Southern Africa chapter, Phillip Kakuru. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter.
All right, we've just been watching this young rising politician, Bobi Wine, on our screens just now. And he talks about this challenge that he's had with Ugandan authorities. He's even accused the authorities of torturing him and continual intimidation and arrests by the government. Why is he such a threat that he's subjected to this?
I don't think that Bobi Wine is such a threat to government, but it is the politics of sensationalization by his team, I can say. And for instance, why would they say he was tortured? Every state has security decorum that must be followed. The incident he mentions probably that was critical was when the president was going for campaigns in northern Uganda, and him and a bunch of other followers of his threw stones and smashed the president's convoy. And I think it's understandable in any democracy. You cannot abuse that right of the privilege of the president. I can say that it's because of the democracy that he's still even alive. In the days of Idi Amin, of the days of Obote, he could have disappeared from the surface.
So you're saying he hasn't been unduly harassed by the authorities?
Not at all. I believe that if he follows the right path and the right regulations that allow him to canvass for support. For instance, he contested in a constituency and was able to be a member of parliament.
But Human Rights Watch paint a very different picture about human rights in Uganda. They say that Uganda is not scoring very well on the human rights front. What do you say to organizations such as Human Rights Watch?
Right, Human Rights Watch, before you start saying that the record in Uganda, the present, is not good enough, how was the record of Uganda with the time of Idi Amin in 1971? Where a chief justice could disappear, where ministers would be assassinated in broad daylight, where a bishop was assassinated.
So you're saying it's better than before,
we
but
need to talk about the history. Where do we come from? Where are we? And where do we envisage to be? There is the ideal situation and the progress to get to the ideal situation. By and large, I can say that we are standing at over 90%. Freedom of place.
But you don't want to compare yourself to Idi Amin, surely.
We had a President Milton Obote, and
you still don't want to compare yourself. You just want to say what's the right thing to do. And these international human rights organizations are saying that you're not doing the right things often enough.
Okay, there is when someone says we are striving for something better, but there is a good situation that allows this freedom of rights. If there were no freedom or human rights really per se, then you have to look at, he's an artist. He can converge for support. He can campaign freely. He can travel, come criticize government, both within the country and outside the country, and he's back in a country. I believe there is a very standard, acceptable, and reasonable state of affairs in terms of human rights. Government has lost cases in certain instances on human rights record. Fair and square, I think that the situation is not as bad as portrayed by the media.
All right, so you're having a conference. What's the purpose of this conference? What are you going to be doing?
The purpose of the conference, when we talk of NRM Southern Africa, the NRM has branches in the diaspora. Diaspora is a league within the NRM as a party. It is in North America, it is in Europe and Southern Africa. And Southern Africa is the largest chapter of the diaspora because it includes Zimbabwe, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, Swaziland. And we are endorsing the president for 2021 elections as our sole candidate. So this is the first of the inaugural conference to be held by the diaspora to endorse our current president as the sole candidate for 2021.
33 years in government and power. You don't think that's enough?
33 years, yes, somebody might say that this is enough. It's a long time, but look at the democracies in Germany. It's like you ask somebody and say, how come the Germans don't have term limits? Because there are certain democracies or practices of democracy we copy within the world, but is it for the good that he's staying? I will give an example. People said it's been long for Gaddafi to have been a president in Libya. When they removed Gaddafi, I think the country has gone back 30 years behind in terms
Are you saying that President Museveni is the only person who can run Uganda, that there's nobody else capable?
No. The NRM systems are working on on somebody to succeed him.
When?
We believe that this should be his last term, and because he's trying to look for an ideal successor. The challenge is that you cannot pinpoint and say this one. So the system is grooming, and we shall be able to come out with any other candidate. For example, we can get an example of Angola. People complained so much about Eduardo dos Santos, but the system had to screen their cadreship to see that who is capable of taking over. And I believe that the current president in Angola, after 32 years, is doing a great work. I believe that our president is equal.
You don't think, though, that there's a move across the continent to stop presidents staying in power for undue lengths of time, that there's a new way of looking at leadership on the continent and also bringing in younger voices? I mean, 2 years ago, your country changed the constitution to enable the president to stay in power. That's going out of its way to make sure that he has another chance to become president, changing the law.
The law should be flexible. A constitution is not like the Catholic dogma of Lom ex finita, when Lom has said nothing can be changed. It's not a Bible. A constitution is dynamic to the times and the changes and the demands of the country. The constitution had to change because the people felt there was a need.
Yeah, but there was a rationale for coming up with an age limit at the time. Did we say that doesn't make sense anymore? Why would you change it? Why would you have put an age limit only to take it off?
Constitutions are not radical. They are subject to change. Let it be the South African Constitution. Certain articles can be amended. And they're amended for a good reason. If people still appreciate the leadership of the person in charge of the state of affairs, why should we be stuck because the rule says so? The rules cannot precede the good. Yeah. The good precedes the rules.
Why should Yoweri Museveni be given another term?
Oh, when I start talking about that, we can
go forever.
We can go forever. Look at for example, the peace and security that he brought into the country and the region. For example, you talk of Idi Amin. We need to appreciate the history to know where we are. When you look at the peace and security, people can walk on the streets of Kampala even with a cell phone. An example of a lady at 1 a.m., something you cannot do in Johannesburg, in the CBD. We look at the regional stability that he has tried to do. We look at the East African Federation. We look at industrialization. Our energy sector came from 0 to about 24% of rural electrification. We look at industrialization. We manufacture our own cell phones. We manufacture our own laptops. We manufacture our own vehicles. We have manufacturing of drugs, for example, ARVs by Cypra and Uganda Quality Chemicals. We talk about education. The Uganda primary education is for free. Uganda secondary education is for free. Now he's advancing to the university. We talk about road infrastructure, expansionism. We talk about the healthcare. So when you look at when you transform society, you start with the 3 sectors: health, education, infrastructure. They are the drivers of the social stratification, the social change. Then when you got energy, because you need energy to go into industrialization, that's the theme of the 4th industrial revolution. So if he believes he has got Ugandans where the GDP was 246 million, the GDP stands at $25 billion. So we are looking at the middle income status by 2030.
Okay, so you're a great believer, but at the same time, corruption has done this during his tenure as well in the country. How do you explain that?
Corruption, that's a fact. Corruption is a big problem. There was a march over the weekend on Friday. There was a march about corruption.
But people are saying that how dare he march against corruption when it's happened under his watch?
You see, the governance is a system. It's not one-man show.
Yeah.
So if you put up structures, the judiciary, the parliament, the independent government, the DPP, you cannot know.
So because it's not him.
It's not him. It's a system is big. So we need to rectify and address the challenges within a system.
All right, Mr. Kakuru, we're going to have to leave it there. But thanks so much indeed for joining us, and we wish you the best of luck with your conference. And let's see what the Ugandans decide in 2021, whether they've heard your message or maybe the message of Bobi Wine.
Sure. I believe we shall come back here when we are celebrating the victory of NLM.
Okay. Asante sana. Thank you so much.
Asante sana.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more about continental issues, this time in Côte d'Ivoire.